Way through hour number 2. Welcome back inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk, an internet radio broadcasting company. Please download our free app. You can go to Power Talk Live and download our free app. Everybody's got a smartphone these days, for better or for worse. You can stream all of our live local programming, full-on extraterrestrial radio, expanding consciousness, love, enlightenment, and wisdom. And it's an honor to have you making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I want to bring in a cat who's been on my radar for some time, looking to expand out, flesh out his career. He's a man of deep spirit and spirituality and love and wisdom now. And he's also a pretty accomplished guitar player and rocker. Found success early in his career. I have a hunch it might have been overwhelming, but he's certainly steadied the anchor, steadied the ship. And he's moving straight ahead now. Kevin Russell, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thanks, Jake. What an introduction! Wow, can I live up to that?
Well, I was riffing off the top of my head on that. But it's great to connect with you, brother. But no,
thank you.
Can you talk candidly about tasting pop material success very early in your life, how you handled it, and then ultimately, if there were stumbling blocks and how you overcame it? I just find it important. The more and more I talk to cats now, jazzers, if you were going to be a jazzer like Freddie Hubbard or Lee Morgan or Miles,
right.
Listen,
wow.
Those cats were sidemen before they became leaders. And then at a certain point, record companies, not actually very soon around the time that you were coming up, they were like, we're just going to make stars out of kids that are straight out of high school. They have a certain look. We want to make them popular. But they gave all this responsibility to people that haven't even matured. And to me, that was a major demarcation point in our history. But I just wanted you to riff on that for a minute.
Well, you're probably talking about 707, I'm sure.
That's right.
And I had been playing, in Detroit. I'm born and raised in Detroit, so I've been playing since I was a little kid. I grew up playing with my dad and my older brother. So I started gigging really young and studied and took lessons. And so, by the time I was 22 and decided to leave Detroit because I thought I kind of had hit the ceiling there as far as work and being a guitar player around town, I wanted to, expand my opportunities as a young guy and move to Hollywood. So I did in the summer of 76. And I will say that Hollywood in the mid-70s was great. It was off the hook. It was really cool.
Hollywood be thy name. I cannot believe you were out in Hollywood. Hold on for a second. But in Detroit, you must have been steeped in... to be in Detroit in the early 70s, were you seeing like Parliament in these clubs, Funkadelic? What were you checking out?
Well, earlier than that, growing up in the 60s, Detroit was, as you can well imagine, Jake, was amazing. And being able to drive down Grant Boulevard, what is now Hitsville USA Museum, but was Motown, and just, on my way, literally my mom taking my older brother and I to our pediatrician at the Fisher Building, driving uptown Grand Boulevard, and my mom would point and go, "Oh yeah, look over there on the porch. That's that young Diana Ross, and smoking.
Yeah,
and
right.
Everybody be hanging out." But here's the truth.
Yeah.
When I was young in Motown, I didn't think anybody was listening except Detroit to that music. I had no idea that they were going to become these huge stars, and Barry Gordy and Motown would become iconic, and Stevie Wonder. And I saw Motown reviews when I was a little kid. So little Stevie Wonder, I think he was 11 or 12.
But I want to be clear about something. With time perspective, you can see, but at the time, these cats their careers were already underway. Is that, their
careers were underway, right. And we were listening to local radio and black radio, my brother and I, older brother and I. And so that's it. But around that same time, in the late 60s, so I don't want your viewers to...
Listeners. Kevin, you're just riff, man. You're doing awesome.
Okay.
Just go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I'm going to say next, all political views aside,
sure,
all NRA views aside, Ted Nugent and I have been buddies for a lifetime. We go back. Okay.
Sure, he's a Detroit cat.
Oh God, yeah. We had the same guitar teacher. I'd see young Teddy every Thursday. He was after me. My lesson was first with the great Joe Podorczyk, our teacher, and who was also a funk brother. And so,
wow.
you know,
really?
I was exposed to some pretty cool stuff early on. As I got a little older, I was, because I could read, so I played some local shows when she came to town with the great, I want to say Nancy Wilson, and I would Joe Simon, R&B guy who had some big hits in the early '70s. Joe Williams.
Well, let me slow down. You could sight read, so when these cats came in and were looking for a rhythm section, you were playing with them?
Yeah, I could read,
cow!
sight read
Joe
well.
Simon, dude, that dude's a bad man.
Yeah, choking con, baby. So in black clubs, and so
we could spend an hour on that. You were in the pocket of you. So I mean, because the best thing about Detroit, because Spider Webb was a serious drummer, Kenneth Spider Rice, and he played with Harry Belafonte, but he talked about in those black clubs, because in jazz clubs they were also playing Motown, so you get funks. So I mean, just put us back. That to me was how elastic music was. How did you fit into that? And you were probably, what, 12, 15, 13?
No, a little older, in my teens, like older teens, like when I, 17, 18, 19, when I was getting calls, because I had befriended horn players, as a matter of fact, and a lot of guys were doing Motown dates and or were buddies, or were higher up in the union, the hierarchy there, Local 5, and would get calls to do, when singers or artists would come to town and they needed X amount of local musicians, and maybe these artists probably in most cases carried their musical director, aka a piano player,
right?
And they would augment the rest of the band. So I could read pretty well, so I'd get calls to sub for somebody or play these. And I did a couple of weeks with Big Joe Williams, my older brother and I, and a Motown bass player who did, some subbing, and it wasn't Jamie, it wasn't the main cats, but so I would do a variety of things, and so I've always said, coming from Detroit, it's like heavy R&B and hard on the rock. Heavy on the R&B and hard on rock, and so Detroit is the only city that created rock soul. I mean, that was it. Before Detroit, there was no rock soul.
I've heard jazz. Tony Williams dubbed it jazz rock. I've never heard rock soul, but I think you're spot on.
Yeah, rock soul would be Bob Seger. Rock soul would be Mitch Ryder. Rock soul would be Mark Farner, Grand Funk.
I dig.
And so I was really taken with that, because even MC5, even
absolutely.
Rob Tyner,
right,
singer,
right.
was so they were a garage punk band, but they were steeped heavy in blues and R&B, and you just couldn't escape it. So I was starting to get gigs and get calls and fast forward gigs. So then it was time for me to move along, and a couple of my Detroiter buddies had already moved out to Hollywood. And a couple of my
Motown. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Motown moved out to Hollywood.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah. I would say by what was that? Maybe 69, 70.
Yeah, 70 early. I mean, because Willie Hutch was cranking out there doing Motown. But I mean, but I'm saying you made that. That's where it was happening.
Well, that's where it was happening. So getting to Hollywood in 1976 as a 22-year-old, and it was. Still, the club scene was happening again, and there was a new movement coming, and then there was the wave of melodic rock and punk, and a new wave, the skinny tie bands. All this was happening at once, and it was starting to happen. And so, I knocked around and got a gig and played, and Hollywood and LA musicians really loved Detroit guitar players. So I always worked playing top 40, whatever, clubs. I got working, pretty soon after I moved. And then it was, I met Duke McFadden, who was the pianist in 707. I got a call. I joined the Musicians Contact Service, and you could look through the books for people who were looking, or they could look and see who was freelance. So I got a call out of the blue to do a wedding gig, and I showed up and met Duke McFadden and Jack White, the drummer, who played with Rick Springfield forever and ever, who was a Detroiter. And so it was like, oh man. So we get on the gig. Duke and I hit it off really well. And then I found out a drummer that I loved, Jim McClarty from Detroit, had moved to Hollywood. We actually talked about this briefly before my move. Someone told me, hey, yeah, Detroit, blah, 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 is in town. He's living with the bass player friend of his. So Duke and I hit it off really well. He called me to do some demos with him, and we talked and discussed about doing something. And I got a call from a singer. He was a black cat who was a hard rock singer, like way before Living Colour. We're talking like this is like 1977, right? So
just keep going. This is unreal.
Yeah, it wasn't received well. His name was Stephen Stallworth. Anyway, so I called Jim.
Wait, hold on. Some black guy who was singing rock was not well received. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It wasn't, because, like I say, it was way before Living Colour.
Oh, I did. I understand. I did. I just want to get it straight.
It was like Hollywood. They were digging it, but they were like, they're looking for Robert Plant. So, I called. Duke also played bass as well as piano, so I had him play bass. I got Jim. I put a power trio behind the guy. Long story short, we do a showcase. I get a manager involved, some guy around town who was at a management company who also managed Bloodstone at the time.
Love that group.
I'll figure that, right? So anyway, I called this guy, and he's interested in managing. So we get a showcase, and we showcase for Atlantic at SIR Studios with Stallworth, with the singer. Guy comes in, real long beard, long hair, and kind of looks like one of the Smith Brothers crop drops. I go, yeah, John Kolodner. So, yep, so he listens, blah, 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 says, I'll be right back, goes out to his car, comes in, hands each one of us Foreigner's first album, said I just signed him. The leader of the band was from a band called Spooky Tooth. This is what we're calling melodic rock, and it's going to be the wave of the future. Listen to it. I think you need to go in this direction. Okay. Then he calls the manager, and he says, we get this call later on. So Kolodner had called the manager after all this and said, get rid of the singer. I noticed that the bass player doubles on piano, and I heard him singing some backgrounds as well as a guitar player. Move that bass player over to piano. Find yourself a bass player. Get rid of that singer and have those guys start writing songs and get something going. I like what I heard there. The beginnings of 707. That's what it was.
Wow. So, how far were you away? How far were you away from his melodic rock conception? I mean, at that point, how much? He said you wanted.
Well, backing up the singer, it was pretty hard rock. It was pretty hard.
Right.
Pretty hard. He wanted the Detroit guitar thing, and it was pretty rocking, and he was way smitten with Zeppelin.
So then that's where can you talk to the audience about how you go from hard rock to more melodic? I just love melody and song is important. It's vapid.
Well,
go ahead.
We did a couple of songs. I'm trying to think now, Jake, that were penned by Duke, one or two that were penned by me, that were written by us, that the singer sang in this particular showcase. And I think the Blow by Blow, I'm sure the manager was telling Kolodner blow by blow, like who was writing what. So I think when those couple songs came around, Kolodner's the man. He was the man. He had the ears. He knew. He could hear. He didn't sign us. Ultimately, we did not end up on Atlantic, but because of John, things shifted major, and I just knew about his track record. I didn't know him, but I put on that Foreigner first album when I got home that day, and was blown away, completely blown away, wore it out. I mean, blown away.
No, this is like, yeah. Go ahead.
I love Spooky Tooth, so I knew who Mick Jones was, as well as Gary Wright. But Lou Gramm was like, he was like the new Paul Rogers or something to me. I was like, man, this cat. But I just loved how it was blues based, but it was melodic, and it was a lot of guitar stuff, but there was keyboard things, and it was like it's where we wanted to go. So that's what we decided, and we worked hard, and then we started playing clubs in Hollywood. We started playing the Starwood opening, and then we got to the point where we were blowing the headliners off, and then we did a fair amount of shows with Quiet Riot in the early days, and Randy Rhoads and I became buddies enough at Soundcheck. He's one of the sweetest guys ever, and he loved my playing, and I certainly loved his playing. And he played a white Les Paul, and I played a black Les Paul custom, and so we got on well. And so we started doing some of these co-bills. Finally, we started to get the headline, Starwood, sell it out, lines around the block when we played. Then we got to play the Whiskey. Then we got to play the Roxy. And we went back to the Starwood because that was our home base. Our next manager, Fred Rupert, who got involved, got Bruce Byrd from Casablanca to come down. That's how it was. And we knew who Neil Bogart was from Buddha, and we certainly knew about Casablanca. Yeah, Donna Summer and Village People did disco, but we knew they had one of the biggest bands in the world, Kiss. So we're like, well, cool. Anyway, he brings him down. He comes into the set. Bruce Byrd watches the whole set. We get off before our encore. He says, our manager says, Bruce Byrd, big guy he was, and he shook all our hand. He said, hey, how would you guys like to be Casablanca recording artists? And we were like, oh, my God. Yeah, so we went down. We played the encore of our life. Came back. We all toasted and dressed and blah, blah, blah. And it was right before Christmas. Paperwork was done. We started recording our first album in January of 1980. Then the album was released. Really nothing's happening. During this time, we're not getting along with Duke. We part ways. Phil, Bryant, Jim McClarty, myself part ways with Duke. And Fred Rupert, the manager. And so, hindsight, we did what we had to do. Not a great decision. But now we find out we have a breakout single on I Could Be Good For You. And I think it was breaking in Kansas City or St. Louis somewhere. And Detroit jumped on it. And when Detroit found out that 3/4 of the band was Detroit, they went hard on it, both rock radio. So now we're ready to start our second album without Duke, the three of us and hired keyboard players. And now we have a breakout single on rock radio. Now what do we do? We're like, oh boy, now we go out on tour. We finish the second album, we go out on tour. Now we got 2 albums. We do a club tour. We're selling out clubs all over. Then we come back and we get ready for some co-bills and blah, blah, blah. And we do another swing. And then we get offered the REO Speedwagon Tour in 1981. Their High Infidelity Tour, right? The biggest tour that year. They're huge. They blew up. So we're the opening act. Seemed like forever. And we started, when we were opening for REO Speedwagon, and we're going over great, and everybody knew they had the audience had all heard of I Could Be Good For You, so that would be a great reception when we kick into that. It was unbelievable, when you hear 15,000, 20,000 people screaming and approving of the intro of your song, because they know it and they know all the words. I'm 20, I don't know, 26, 25, something, and I'm 26, and I have a little daughter at home and my ex-wife in Hollywood, and I'm on the road. And yeah, and
here's the question. I want to ask you very simply, like, how do you not try to make a hit and it becomes a hit? I don't believe you guys were in the studio saying we got to. Although I would love you to take me through that process of it became big, but I mean I think my generation, younger generations, the idea is we have to make a hit. The pressure, we have to make a hit. We have to, and that never comes. Yeah. But I mean, you guys, it happens so organically. I'd just like you to talk about how not to make a hit, and that's how it turns into a hit.
Well, I Could Be Good For You is as simple as this. We argued over that song when we were recording in the studio. There was lots of arguments, as you can well imagine. Young artistic guys who want to be heard, so we're fighting all the time. And but we're getting some great stuff, but we're fighting. And so Duke decides it was kind of later, because we already had this song written. We wrote it in a couple of sittings, right? And then we started playing it at our club gigs around Hollywood. And it went over, but we thought it was a cool rocker. And we were just like, it was kind of cool. It was kind of foreigner-ish. It was kind of whatever. And we didn't think. But I fell in love with it. And then we got to the studio. Then there was, we had too many songs. And Duke really didn't want I Could Be Good For You on the album. So
wow.
I completely
was it a jealous? I mean,
I don't know. He thought we had other better songs.
Wow.
So the producer, no. So he's arguing for it. The manager's arguing for it. I'm arguing for it. Not only did it end up on the record, it was the first track on the album, and it was the hit. So, no, you don't know. Did I think it was a hit? No. Did I even know what that was, Jake? No. But I knew that it had a very cool guitar riff, total, rocking guitar riff that I just loved to play, and it had a cool guitar solo that I loved to play, and I loved the chorus, and it was melodic, and I had all that great stuff that Duke put in the verses, and it was all wonderful. So I thought it's just a rather cool song. That's all.
We're talking to Kevin Russell here, really glib and quite an accomplished guitar player out of the Motor City. We're living through a pretty historical time in the world and in our country. As objectively as you can. You're a pastor now.
No, not me. No, the ex-drummer from 707 is.
So you are. But where are you based now?
I'm in San Francisco. I'm in Marin County.
You're still in Marin County. Okay. So I was going to go off I was going to go off on more of a faith-based thing. So I have to ask you, I first came across Kevin Russell. I was looking at your website maybe a couple years ago when I realized that you had connected with David Margen and Bill Kreutzmann, and I mean, this is absolutely classic to me. That I would like you to work your way through. Once you got the band disbanded, obviously 707 took a break, but then how did you wind up in the Bay Area, and then how the heck did you wind up connecting with Brent, Billy, and Dave?
I'll speed it along. So band 707 disbanded in 1983. Then I started taking gigs. We came up to record the Megaforce album at the urging of our third management team. They wanted us to get out of L.A. and record, isolate us and get us recording at the record plant in Sausalito. So that's what that was. And then my ex-wife at the time fell in love with Marin County, and the rest is history. So I moved up. So blah, blah, blah.
It was still somewhat affordable at that time.
Yeah. It was. It was.
Absolutely. Early '80s. It was still. You were okay.
Yeah, we were okay. It was okay. Yeah. And so then I was kind of lost for a little while. The band broke up, and all the guys left, and here I was. And so I knocked around and played and took gigs wherever I could, and played all kind of gigs. And because I could read, like I said, I could get other gigs. And no rock star, no buses, no arenas, no roadies, gigs. I went back to doing what I do. I'm a musician. So pretty humbling and pretty scary. So I had met Dave Margen, I don't know where, but somewhere around the scene. I had met Dave, and we became friendly enough, and but respected each other's playing. And he was with Carlos. He was with Santana.
Absolutely. Can I ask you were you playing? What kind of club? Which clubs were you playing? I've done.
I was playing clubs in the South Bay. I was playing what they call casuals. I was playing weddings. I was playing boat cruises. I was playing, you name it, I did it.
Right.
Show stuff.
But I guess the reality is, like in Berkeley or those areas, people like,
Yeah.
I mean, Margen lived there, but I mean, those cats were just, they were out checking out the scene, or that's
yeah. They were checking out the scene, so we became buddy. Anyway, so 1985, I get a call from Dave and said, "You want to come down and come down to Front Street." I was living in San Rafael. Wasn't living too far from where the Dead rehearsed. I mean, probably a mile and a half. And you want to come down and have a play with Billy Kreutzmann and the late, great Brent Midland.
Well, how did you meet them, though?
I met them that night, first night of the first play. I only knew Dave. Margen called me in.
Oh, Margen called you and said, "Do you want to come play with Brent and Billy?" Oh, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, you want to come play?
Oh, this is classic.
They're thinking of putting something together, a side thing. Dead's kind of on hiatus. And you can go to the sacred Front Street. And so I knew not much of the Dead.
Sure.
And being up here in the Bay Area, I didn't know. It was kind of a running joke, 707, because we were an LA band up here. And the closest thing we could relate to was probably the Stone in the city rock club. We were like, oh boy. So the running joke was, Kevin, one day you'll end up like playing in some Grateful Dead band. And
but this is so interesting because you come in you broke that rock soul. I mean, that you were coming from the Detroit hard rock. You wound up in Hollywood, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into this really just creative freedom space. But I know that you probably had the chops to do that. I'm not sure how you felt about.
No, it was all good.
Yeah,
it was all good
because
the early 70s, when I was in Detroit, and I had toured. I started touring when I was 18, hitting the road, playing with horn bands and show bands out the East Coast, and I did Hair off Broadway when I was 19, summer stock. All traveled all over the East and lived in New York off and on the whole summer of 74,
wow.
73, 4. And so, and then around that period, I was turned on to Mahavishnu, Chick Corea, Larry Coryell, 11th House, Brian Augers, Oblivion Express.
Oh, burning.
Oh, yeah, man. So
burning.
Now I'm like, I'm way into that. I come back, and so I'm playing around town with cats, electric violin player and piano player and bass players, and all the cats playing fusion.
Yeah, you had your own little Mahavishnu thing going.
Yeah. So we're playing around. Yeah. And Herbie Hancock was happening.
Sure.
So all of that, I just loved it because I loved everything about it, and especially the musicianship and the chops. And I was practicing a lot, Jake. So my chops were up, and so it wasn't like going to that first play with the Dead guys, which that band would become Kokomo, and it wasn't a stretch for me at all playing free. I mean, no, and playing with Billy.
I know it's not. So you get. I mean, that place was riffraff. San Rafael was a funky town still at that time. You go in. And you met, and that was the first time you met him, Brent and Billy, and then take it from there. I mean, this to me is absolute classic history.
Yeah. So, hey, how you doing? And Brent's sitting behind the B3, and Billy's sitting behind the drums, and they had an amp for me, Marshall, and everything. And Dave's like, "Yeah, it's my buddy Kevin Russell." And they're like, "Yeah, man, we heard all about you." Blah blah blah. So we played for, I don't know, an hour maybe. We jammed on some stuff, and Brent said, "I got a tune that goes like this." He just laid out the chord changes for me, and we kind of vibed it up, and we're playing. And then Billy says, "Yeah, I'm going to line up a tour," and because I think he had Steps Ahead or something he had with Margen, because Margen had played with those guys before.
Well, they had this thing called Margen had played it with Kingfish with Bob Weir,
okay.
But there was that city section with Alex Litcherwood, who was also in Brian Auger, Oblivion Express. But
right.
I guess I'm curious about like the what was different even before Kokomo started to play live? I mean, when you guys were rehearsing, can you talk about how that was a different experience than anything else you might have? Well, I mean, like you said, you had done Hair and you'd gotten exposed to the fusion, but I mean, you hadn't really played it before. So what was kind of inspiring about it?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was very blues based anyway.
Right.
So it was, it was all in my wheelhouse. It wasn't, it wasn't really like out there for me. I think Billy being the kind of drummer he was, and me growing up with two drummers in the house, my father and my older brother, and being so committed to strong rhythm guitar playing, it was different for me in that regard. But I will say this, Brent and Billy were very, very supportive of my tunes. And because I had sent Margen a cassette of some of the demo stuff that I was doing at the record plant in L.A.
Sure.
With some good people, that was melodic, but more rock, kind of in the 707 direction, but, and it had a lot of elements to it. So Margen had this cassette, and he had played it for Billy and Brent, and that's when they said, yeah, bring this guy down. So Brent says to me at this first rehearsal, I got your cassette, man, and I like your tunes. I'm like, oh, really? I said, well, thanks. He goes, yeah, I think we should be doing at least 2 or 3 of those in the set. I'm like, okay. So that was a really wonderful surprise.
Thank you so much. You know what, man? I never saw The Dead. I mean, I just get off so much. Brent Midland's one of my favorite, if not my favorite musician of all time. And I just love to hear these personal stories about the idea of, like easily any other, they could have been jerks and been like, this stuff, we're just playing our tunes, or, the idea of them,
they could have been.
Yeah, they could have been totally stand up. I love the support nature. And I guess I think also Margen is such a pocket. He's not Phil Lesh. I mean, Margen is right in, he is keep locking that groove with Billy, and he didn't let Billy get so free because Billy was playing with the Dead for so long. I have to believe he kind of wanted to just get back to just the rudiments. But to me, this is just exhilarating. So your tunes, now, do you have any, so Billy lines up a tour and it becomes Coco. Was there a Caribbean flavor to the music? Why did the band get named Kokomo?
I don't know. Billy came up with that, and so I really didn't. I didn't care what he called it. It was his thing, and he got John Shear, one of the biggest promoters at the time in the East Coast, to do the club tour and small theater tour, and it was very interesting and enlightening at the same time for me, because I had never been brought. I was brought into the Dead world, and I certainly had no prior experience or any prior conception. I didn't know what it was, other than I heard the band, a number of their songs, but I didn't know anything about it. And so I was brought into this world full throttle. And so we're playing Brent's tunes, my tunes. We're covering some Dead tunes and kind of twisting them around. Now here I am, putting the rock in here. Here I am, the cat with long layered hair. Here I am, MTV's in full swing at this time.
Absolutely.
Here I am, and I'm going to say that I got a story for you, and I know exactly which date it happened on. But in the beginning, and we saw a lot of the same people at the shows, city to city, and Kreutzmann would give me a briefing and a tutorial on this whole thing, how it runs, and you'll see these people here, and they'll be camping out here. And I'm like, oh my God, what? He's like, oh no, man. So he would he's telling me what goes on in the Dead world, right?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, and I'm finding the whole thing just completely amusing. So I was not received very well in the beginning. I had a lot of Jerry, Bobby chants from out. They did, they weren't just digging that. that look.
Well, no, and I think this goes back. This is so fascinating because I think it goes back to this sort of narrow mind. I mean, I'm not trying to bash on Deadheads or the community, but I really find that a lot of them, they were so limited. They were going there for a party mentality, and they weren't necessarily recognizing the musicianship of cats like Kreutzmann and Brent to say, no, we're just doing our own thing. This isn't the Grateful Dead. Like, you should be able to really be open-eared to that. And I mean, in any event, so you were, but that, how did you, how did you, just in general, how do you have the moxie to sort of tune that out and just still channel your own career?
Oh, I didn't care. I was like, whatever, whatever. I'm just playing, and I got a couple of Marshall stacks behind me, Jake. So I don't care. I'm wailing, playing my Les Pauls, having a ball. The band sounds really good. Loved playing with Brent and Billy and Dave. And it was, a lot of fun. And so we're in Baltimore. I believe it's Baltimore.
I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm looking at the set lists. You had quite a long set. You started.
Oh yeah.
Let me see here. I'm gonna try. Was it in D.C. or was it in Baltimore? Because I'm looking here. I'm looking here.
Itinerary.
The Bayou in Washington D.C. You went Jersey, D.C., Boston. I don't see any Baltimore on here.
No, there's not Baltimore. D.C.
Yeah. Okay. So it was the club was called the Bayou.
Okay. Right. And so that was it. Yeah, I was thinking it was either Baltimore or D.C. D.C.
August 11th, 1985.
Right. Billy goes up to slams the sticks down on the snare, walks out to the front of the stage, grabs my mic, and goes off on this completely packed house about them with the chanting, and Jerry and Bobby, and went off on them and came over and put his arm around me and pulled me to the center of the stage and used, and the F-bombs flew and said, "This is my friend. I invited him. He's a world-class guitar player. He's a great blah, 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 blah. And you better start blah, 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 effing right, treating him with respect. Let me hear it for Kevin Russell." And the whole place got on their feet. Now, he spoke. And I was like, I just looked at Billy, and I was like teary-eyed.
Wow, this is unbelievable.
He goes, yeah, man, now let's play. I'll never forget. From that point on, the word for the rest of the dates, then we got to San Francisco, and we did we did shows here. And the word was out, and Bobby came and sat in with us. And so the word was out that I was okay. But Relics magazine wasn't having it, and they ripped into me. Whoever did the review, and my MTV slickness marred the band or something like that. And so I'm at Billy's. He purchased a new home at the time. Around this time, the band's kind of winding down, and he's in San Anselmo here in Margen, and we own a house, and he and I are hanging out, and we're laughing and we're talking, and we go, yeah, the whole MTV thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess who shot a video for Touch of Grey and blew up on MTV shortly thereafter was the Dead. And I remember him and I just cracking up about that, and because he remembers how they were like, and then Relics was this whole MTV. Like, MTV was a bad word in that whole Dead world. It
Absolutely.
was like a really it was a bad thing.
Right, because it meant slick and polished, and
it meant all that. I mean, what are you kidding? They're breaking acts in your living room. I mean, their acts are breaking overnight because of this, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, they don't need it.
How amazing that, because how appropriate is it that then they hit stardom? I mean, they became overnight.
In doing, Touch of Grey. I mean, and Billy and I laughed. He was really forthcoming about that, and I hit it off really well with Billy, and I think I understood him, and I think he felt I did, and I accepted him for who he was and what he did.
Absolutely.
And,
go ahead.
And I have nothing but respect. And to this day, and I will say that and Brent was one of the sweetest souls that I ever knew, and so supportive, and what a soulful cat, man. This guy was like, he reminded me a lot of Greg Allman, and I love that about him. And so he and I hit it off right away musically. And he battled with his demons, God rest his soul. And so, but there was no rock star stuff. Those guys, the Dead was as big as any band could ever be, but there was never any of that, which I was so used to from bands that were not even close to being as big as the Dead, that had a lot of bravado and ego. And so I was used to that world, especially touring, with other acts. So to get with those guys, and it was just so low key and like non-rock star, but that tour we lived like rock stars. So
well, but also what's so interesting is that really, they were still. I mean, in 1985, when you were with Kokomo, I mean, the Dead played on Halloween on the University of South Carolina campus. Okay, they were still playing university gigs. They were still underground. After Touch of Grey, and if I ever get a chance to rap with Billy, I mean, to me, it's like they got tremendous. They were secured financially at that point. They became overnight, but because of it, they became so big, and ultimately, you see carnage started to occur at the shows. People started to die. People started getting killed. The problems with the police. Yeah. So I mean, it was a give and take. My question for you is, why do you think Billy and Brent? What did they like about your playing? I'm curious because they must have articulated that to you. You were not anywhere like. You didn't have a bluegrass background or, like Garcia. But I mean, improvisationally, you guys opened stuff up. So what did they like about it?
Well, I think probably first and foremost, Detroit. They liked that in me. Right. And they liked the, being a blues-based rock, funky player that had vocabulary, I think, was, and they found it to be kind of refreshing. And also, I was the guy who lobbied for shorter guitar solos. Man, they're like, "What? Man, let's just play more songs and less guitar solos." They're like, "What?" They were laughing. They found that. I remember they found that so funny.
Because they're off into. Kevin, do you? Do you have any recordings of Kokomo?
I don't know. I don't think I do, but
I mean, even rehearsals, and there's nothing that circulates, and it's unfortunate because the band that was put together after you go ahead, there's plenty of tapes that circulate. The Kokomo stuff, it would just be a fun project to work on because I got to meet. Yeah. I got to meet Margen, who I love to death, and sure. Brent is in my soul. Billy is just, and to be able to bring, to bring you into the mix today, it's a high honor, and I look forward to. I look forward to doing more with you in the future, man. I'm just piecing this puzzle back together because it was a lot about supporting the band. The band was always. The music was always bigger than any one individual, and Billy getting up on the mic and telling the Deadheads to shut up and listen because this guy is a good player and he's my friend. That in essence, that's a large chunk of what's missing across all spectrums of society today. And I think it's this is why I do my show, man. And I really
Well, and fast forward, and I did things after that, and then did a lot of things and toured. And when the Stray Cats broke up, I joined up with Slim Jim and Lee and Earl Slick, my old buddy, and we toured and made records and things and blah, 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 and did other things. And Clarence Clemens, rest his soul, I was with Clarence and musical director and for him, and he introduced me to some wonderful people, and I got to play on some wonderful records, and people like Lee Von Helm and Nils Lofgren. And it was just a wonderful time. The fall of 1990 came, Jake, and I got sober. October 29th, 1990, I got sober.
Can we do a part two? Because I don't want to rush through this. I don't want to rush through this.
There's a lot that, and there's the band with Neil Schon. There's things that precede my sobriety. I was doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, let's just cut it here, and then we'll connect and do another one.
Do part 2, and we'll talk post that, and then the spiritual side. Yeah, I want to tap on that.
I do, because ultimately I know
big stuff.
Yeah, because you know what? No matter what you talk about, everybody has their demons, but when you meet a certain type, I mean, you look at Brent. It's a perfect example.
It broke my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? But you're still, you got both feet on the ground here still, and so we'll much love to you, brother. And
well, much love to you, Jake. Thank you. And it's a good life, and I'm very blessed.
You are, brother.
In all areas.
Oh yeah.
I have a beautiful wife, and all of my children, stepchildren, and my children, and grandbaby. Everybody's healthy and happy. It's a different life today, Jay. But I will say this in closing. I rocked the 80s, my friend. That decade, I rocked. I was last man standing at any given function. I don't give.
Well, no,
I don't care
listen.
where
We are stopping at 1985. We have 5 more years of the 80s to go. I cannot wait to break. I can't wait to break it down, man.
Okay.
Cheers, brother.
God bless.
All right, man. Have a good day. Later.
Okay. You too. Bye.
We'll be right back with Sam Cutler right after this on the Jake Feinberg Show.